Hello, Lord Varys at your service. Oh, you have heard me. I suppose over a career one gets to be known across the Seven Kingdoms. Oh, yes. You're not the first person to ask of my story. I suppose it's an interesting one to some. Well, I suppose I started from very humble beginnings. I was not born to royalty or anything of that nature. I was born an orphan. I was a part of a child acting troupe. We would go from town to town, doing plays and whatnot. It was an alright way for an orphan to live, I suppose. Unfortunately for me, at a young age, I was sold to a, I suppose, wizard, if you will. This man had it in his mind that my manhood perhaps had magical powers. And unfortunately for me, he cut it off and used it as part of his spell. I suppose that's why to this day I sort of disdain people who claim to use or know magic. I find most of them just to be charlatans who have no more powers than you or I. And those few that do seem to have some sort of power, they're not governed by rational motivations like regular people. Rather, it's hard to even know what their motivations truly are. Although I have grown past it, it truly is an unhuman thing to do to a small child, an innocent child. I suppose that's why I've always had a soft spot for children. Although I will never have desires like a normal man, I suppose it has given me a few unique qualities that make me quite well suited to the game of spying and information. I find lust often makes the wise man foolish and the good man mean. That is one motivation I do not have when I make my decisions. After the wizard had what he wanted, he discarded me onto the streets, left to die. I suppose I had a little more of an iron will than he expected, or even I did, I suppose, at that point in my life, but I found a way to survive. I would beg, I would steal, I would grant favors that I suppose most would not be proud of, but I survived. In the course of that time, I came to one realization: there are things more valuable than what a young scamp can pull out of somebody's pocket. And that thing is information. Traveling, running the streets, you would hear things that people would say in front of you, not worrying much because you're nothing more than a child. What does this information mean to a child? These things I found out, I realized were very valuable, and I would sell that information. Well, as it turns out, there were a lot of Fangrit kids like me around, and they too heard information. So I put together a little network, my little birds. They would hear things in the streets, in their work, whether they're just the cup boy or an apprentice or whatever. They would tell me such information. I would sell it and give them a little money back. Of course, over time, you begin to get a reputation. And after I'd grown up some, my reputation landed me my first royal assignment. I became a member of the small council and an advisor to Targaryen, the man who later became known as the Mad King. It's really what became a lifelong mission for me to protect the Targaryens, although this might be a surprise to some, given I've worked for the Baratheons, the Lannisters, and others. During this time, I did what I had to do, but my main focus was always to protect the Targaryens. The Mad King's reign ended when the Lannisters sacked King's Landing. With that, Robert Baratheon came to become king, and I believe he realized that I could be of some use to him, so he pardoned me for working with the Targaryens and made me an advisor. Luckily enough, part of the work I did for King Robert was to keep an eye on the living Targaryens, which allowed me to keep an eye on those whom I truly felt I was here to protect. And of course, given I knew their real location, I could always make sure they're one step ahead of King Robert. Of course, with the death of Robert Baratheon, the Lannisters finally took power, and given they knew me quite well, I again became an advisor and a member of the small council. During that time, of course, I made a friendship with Tyrion Lannister. I think we sort of had the same ideology on how one should rule, how the ruling class is really just there for the people, and that they shouldn't have the selfish motivations that most of the kings of the Seven Kingdoms and lords and everything have always had. So our friendship blossomed, if you will, and we got to know each other quite well. Everything changed when Tyrion was blamed for Joffrey's murder. Jaime asked me to get Tyrion out of King's Landing and go into hiding, which I'd planned out. Of course, what I did not plan for is Tyrion killing his father, Tywin. At that moment, I realized that I could no longer stay in King's Landing, and I would have to go on the run with Tyrion. Of course, me and Tyrion were on our trip to see the last of the Targaryens, the mother of dragons. And Tyrion was kidnapped, unfortunately. As it turns out, he ended up in the same place as me, in front of Queen Daenerys. So we did end up reaching our destination that we had planned to the whole time. Of course, at the time, Tyrion didn't know that that's where I was taking him. My plan for Tyrion was to help Daenerys learn how to rule. After all, Tyrion was born a royal and has led for a long time, especially from behind the scenes, of course. He never really had much of favor with his own family, so he never ruled much, but in the small times he did very well. And he, of course, as I said, has the same philosophy as I do. Of course, it was my job to use my connections to make some deals. That, of course, is how Daenerys was able to get her army across the seas. I was able to secure her some boats. So here we are, the Lannisters getting ready to lose King's Landing, and it seems of little importance now with the White Walkers and the impending doom that suggests. In any case, that's my story, I suppose. Some find it interesting, but given what I've been through, seems like the rational path for somebody like myself. Obviously, I'm unable to father any children. I have no titles or lands, although many do call me Lord. Varies out of respect, I suppose. But perhaps someday this story I tell you may be written down or passed down from generation to generation, and perhaps some of my life will live on. But those things I really don't think much about. I live in the here and now, after all. It's the only way I've gotten as far as I have. I hope you enjoyed the story, and hopefully very soon we'll talk again.